Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. C.H. Siddons. Hey, Mr. Siddons.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Good to see you. And Mr. Peter Crable. Hey, Mr. Krabs. Welcome back.
Hey. How you doing?
I'm doing well. We have a great show. This is the holiday Ed's Not Dead special. I just named it such. And as always, Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Ed's Not Dead PC. And of course, check us out on the website, edsnotdead.com. Boys, we got a great show. Mr. Siddons has outdone himself once again by booking Congressman Robert Bobby Scott, who's represented Virginia's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives and is the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee. Good job, Mr. Sids.
Yeah, he's been on our list for quite a while and finally got a chance to do the due diligence necessary to get someone like him on the show.
And very appropriate 1 week after they pass a bill, a massive spending bill with education ramifications, and one day, I guess today, when it was signed into law. Yeah,
that was a happenstance, but it worked out perfect.
Yeah.
It did. We thought it was a slam dunk, and then it took President Trump a while to.
Well, he had to make his way back from the golf course.
I think he had to read the whole thing first. Is actually why.
We know he doesn't read.
Is it weird that I'm nervous about interviewing Bobby Scott?
It's okay to be nervous to interview such a guy. He's got quite a history.
He does. He does. It's a big guest. All right, and then we are also, as promised, over this fall, we are going to do our final Dear Betsy retrospective.
A goodbye fitting only for our Dear Betsy.
That's right. But a dear goodbye to Dear Betsy. We're going to look at her accomplishments or lack thereof in a piece that was recently in NPR. And then at the end, we have a quiz, right, Mr. Siddons?
That's right. Another great quiz lined up after taking a little hiatus from taking a lot of flack from certain people. And, we're back. We're back with another quiz.
All right. Before we jump into show feedback, and don't tell me you're not prepared because I know you are. How was Christmas? How was the holiday?
It was great for me. My little girl Frida, she got to open up a couple presents, but not really because she doesn't really know what a present is or how to open it. So she really loved the wrapping paper and the bows.
There you go.
And the boxes. The boxes are a huge hit.
Can she say Santa yet? Is she recognizing Santa?
No, she's babbling. There's a lot of babbling, but she's babbling all night, all day, during nap times, during her sleep.
And you're cross country skiing during the day in West Virginia. Lucky you, Mr. Sids.
That's right. I got tested. My wife got tested. My in-laws got tested, and we're just a small group here. And cross country skiing allows you to be pretty much isolated from everybody else. So I'm in the deep woods, and it's great.
Nice. Now you know why I love to fish by myself.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And Mr. Krabs, I know you're taking the kids out and doing all kinds of educational and interesting day trips. You're such an overachieving parent.
That's right. Yes. Also a good Christmas with plenty of useless material toys that serve no value whatsoever. Actually, the big one that they really only asked for one thing this year, and it was Nerf guns.
Oh,
yes.
That's a winner.
Yes. So without my wife's permission, I went ahead and purchased a pair of Nerf Ultras. They're pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie. They've come a long way since I've played with Nerf guns. And they have these like little darts. And any guess how many batteries these little bad boys require?
Whoa, 16.
Little on the high side, 6, which was still more than the 0 that I had prepared for them. So nothing quite like getting a present and not having the batteries to.
I thought the old Nerf guns were the ones I remember. You pumped them, but these are
they're air powered.
These are they're almost like a pitching machine, with like the 2 wheels that spin really fast, and then you put the projectile in between them, and they fly forward. So that's what these are. On the inside
Oh.
are two wheels, and it sucks the little dart in, and yeah, they come out real quick.
You're gonna find Nerf darts in
Everywhere.
everywhere for
Everywhere.
years.
Well, I was somewhat smart, and so they came with like 6 or however many are in there. And I was like, oh, those are going to get lost in like a day. So I looked for replacement ones, and the only size they had was a pack of 100, which the kids, unbeknownst to me, took a pair of scissors in the basement and opened them. So I had kind of been like, I was like, oh, I'll hold them on reserve, and we'll find a place to like put them so they're not everywhere. And that didn't even last a day.
Oh my God.
Has youngest dear Pearl got shot in the head yet?
She has not. No,
Okay.
no. We were very adamant. I was like, all right, we're gonna like have these rules, and the rules. Well, the rules are don't shoot on the main floor.
Okay.
You can go in the basement, which is kind of like the playroom, and shoot, and like no shooting in the face. And it was not even noon on Christmas morning, and the kids are downstairs, and Owen, the oldest, starts to cry, and I was like, "Hey, man, are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm fine." And then you hear them talking, and he totally got hit in the eye.
Oh.
But he knew if he told us that they got hit in the eye,
Oh, that was it.
that was going to be it. So good thinking on his part, and we just acted like we didn't know.
That is a fun Christmas present.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's great.
That'll create. Did you get any new toys, Mr. Krabs, like a new guitar or anything?
No. Didn't we? Me and the wife didn't get each other anything, and didn't get myself anything. So I don't know. Well, maybe I should.
You should.
Yeah.
Don't be so austere. Get
Yeah.
Get online post Christmas. That's the best time.
I know.
Oh, RD, I got a tool belt.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Nice for the kitchen remod.
Yes.
All right.
I'm very excited to break it in.
I gotta see that. I've been coveting Wolverine boots, Mr. Siddons. Have you ever seen Wolverine boots?
Yes, they're amazing.
They are, and they are very pricey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife treated me to a nice tool belt with, guess what? Suspenders are optional. They're optional, but
okay,
they're being worn.
You are officially Bob Vila. You are
so excited for it.
That is awesome. I got my one very nice gift was, it's going to be completely boring to our listeners and to you all, but I liked it. I got a Filson waterproof bag, so when I kayak and fish, I can throw all my stuff in the bag and it won't get away.
Water bags are great.
Yeah, it's really, really, really nice.
You didn't get any new Orvis gear?
I did. And it's embarrassing. I got an Orvis cardigan sweater. I officially got the old man sweater. Maybe I should don it before the show is over.
From the Rod and Gun magazine that you get every every
it's
month.
even got the leather elbow patches.
There you go.
Yeah. I just need a brandy and a cigar, and I'll have it all going on. Anyway, well, we hope our listeners had a wonderful Christmas and Hanukkah, and by the time this show comes out, will this come out before
Yes.
New Year's?
We're going to do it before New Year's.
Turnaround's going to be fast.
Oh,
We're still going to be in 2020. It's the last show of 2020.
Yes, it will be.
Holy guacamole.
All right, before we do our retrospective on Dear Betsy DeVos, let's get into some show feedback, Mr. Siddons.
So I actually don't know where this feedback came from. Was it on Facebook?
It was I don't know what, it should have been on iTunes. It has not come through on iTunes, but it should be at some point. So I don't know if it's just like hasn't been approved yet or whatever.
Well, the review is from a former student that Mr. Crable and I had in our classrooms many moons ago, from Andres. He said, I have had 2 of the 3 hosts as a teacher in the past, Peter Crable and Casey Siddons, and I can attest to their dedication to their students. It's great to see them create a show to make education policy both informative and entertaining. The 3rd host, Dr. Dodd, has grown on me with his colorful insights. He does that with everything. He grows on you. overall, great show with tremendous hosts. My only recommendation is that Mr. Siddons is quizzed about the Civil War. Great dig. It's an embarrassing misstep that I made. And thank you, Andres, for listening. And you were a great student, and you're going to do great things in the world. So thanks for listening in, and spread the word.
Thanks, Andres. Couple things about Andres' feedback, Mr. Siddons, since you brought it up. I think in the last 3 months, you've been called out twice about your social studies knowledge. I think your former colleague and social studies leader in MCPS called you out a little bit about some of the.
I did. What did Civil War? Yeah. It was the Civil War.
Okay, so there are some issues with the Civil War. Clearly,
wasn't his area of expertise.
My memory of facts is not great.
All right, and then the other thing is, so Andres had both of you as teachers.
That is correct.
Yes, so, I had him in 6th grade, and Crable had him in 7th grade.
One of the lucky few to get the tandem. There's probably quite a few kids out there, that had that combination.
Two lost years of social studies instruction.
Well, neither of us taught the Civil War, so they probably did okay.
That's great. Great feedback, and that must make you guys feel that's pretty cool that Andres reached out.
It's amazing.
To the pod. That's awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah. Anytime you hear from a former student, especially 10 plus years or whatever it was, it's a special feeling.
Oh yeah.
All right, and that about does it for show feedback. All right, fellas, you ready? I hope our listeners are ready. Dear Betsy has been, we think, we're not sure, but we think one of our better segments over the last 4 years on Ed's Not Dead. NPR recently had a piece, How Education Secretary Betsy DeVos Will Be Remembered. This was about a month ago from Morning Edition. And basically the piece categorizes her different efforts as the head of the federal government's efforts on ed. Mr. Crable, I know you've been furiously taking notes. I know also that recently, I don't know what show it was, I claimed that that her main contribution was neglect, and after I read this, I think I need to correct myself. When I saw some of the things that she had done with guidance and policy at the federal level, it was really not neglect. It was actual deleterious action that she took on a number of fronts. She does get a few props in this. So Mr. Siddons has disappeared temporarily from the show. So
His internet is unstable.
You and I are going to go it alone, Mr. Krabs. Before we get started, do you have any big takes on it or anything, a certain way you want to go about this?
I wrote down a couple of different issues that it kind of, I think call them, I guess, highlights or the practices that she put into place that actually had any effect whatsoever. But first, there's two things that I'd like to talk about that never went into action because her big thing was always school choice. I mean, she came in on the school choice platform, and she went out on the school choice platform. So her big plan was something called Education Freedom Scholarships. So this was $5 billion that she wanted to set aside to give to people to go to private school, basically, or a religious school, also private school. Never even got off the ground, never even was talked about seriously, but that was certainly her a big goal of hers. And then she also at one point had tried to put $400 million in for charters and vouchers, which also never took off. It's just interesting that we talked about this a bunch on the show, but vouchers, for whatever reason, it has never taken off in America at all. And if it didn't take off under her, I don't think that it ever will.
No, I agree. I mean, the large majority of Americans expect to pay taxes to fund their local school systems, and most Americans send their kids to their local school systems.
Yeah.
And you and I, the three of us have talked a lot about innovation and how sometimes innovation just gets squashed in the face of institutionalism. But this obviously is an idea that we don't support. But I don't think I don't think it's the kind of idea that could ever compete with a system, contrary to what she says is no system, has worked in this country for over a century.
And I think to your point, she vastly overestimated dissatisfaction with public schools and with people's neighborhood public schools. And as you've talked about, there's research that shows everybody loves their neighborhood school, but there is generally some distrust or dislike of public school in general. But it is not at all tied to how people actually feel about like the school that their kids go to.
Yeah,
so that's interesting.
I thought before we the carrying guns in school because of bears and those kinds of things, those are all well documented. I thought we'd skip through some of those, and I just wanted to hit you with a few and just get your gut level reaction looking back. So let's delve into the article. In 2018, DeVos dropped guidance that was meant to protect students of color. I think this is interesting, especially based on the current climate that we're on with anti-racism and anti-bias. That was from the Obama administration that was focused on discriminatory discipline. The 2014 guidance from the Obama administration encouraged schools to use alternatives to suspension and expulsion and came with a threat. If a school's district discipline patterns revealed significant racial disparities, it could face a federal civil rights investigation. This was largely just set aside by Betsy DeVos's during her leadership of the Ed Department. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the only positive. Even when it was under Obama, there were guidelines. It was not a law. It was not anything more permanent. So even her rescinding that is something that they can just put back in place once Biden and Cardona come in. So I think that's kind of like the positive of it. She also argued that those guidelines made school campuses less safe. And so I just think that's some pretty stereotypically coded racial and racist language. That the only way to discipline those black kids is to suspend them, basically. And none of the other evidence be damned, or any other approaches be damned as well, that if any kid of color does anything, you better suspend them no matter what.
Yeah. And at the same time, her supporters have demonized practices like restorative justice and any kind of teaching of restorative practices in school as leftist ideas.
Yep.
And so that's
and it kind of falls under the like law and order, how they like to see themselves as the law and order people. Oh, you broke the law, you got to pay the consequences. And it's, really the height of hypocrisy, where it's law and order for everybody else, but fast and loose when it comes to you. It's just another one of those things. But it'll be nice when it comes back. And I think one of the first things that, the Biden administration can do is to put new guidelines in place, rescind the old guidelines, and, hopefully put something in a little bit more permanent that if and when a new administration comes in, they can't just with a click of a finger roll those back.
Yeah, I think I would like to add that I think
you're there.
I'm there. I think it justifies it shows how important these kind of positions are, because they provide this guidance to provide, for a reason. But at the end of the day, a lot of schools are going to be going along with providing transgender bathrooms and more open spaces for students like that across the country, regardless of guidance, now that it has been set by the Department of Education. But I think if you have someone at the top who's supportive of it, of certain guidelines like that, or just providing more open space for students to operate in a school, I think it's really important. And if anything comes out of Betsy DeVos's tenure, it's that the power that is wielded by a secretary is incredibly important. But her model is that, well, we could just do less, and it's still just as damaging to kids across the nation.
All right. So in an era of close examination of police brutality across the country, they did away with heightened awareness or even federal action about discriminatory discipline processes that disproportionately impacted students of color. So moving on to the next the next piece of discriminatory guidance, and this is one, fellas, that I've never been able to figure out the why behind this. She made a lasting impact on how schools must respond to incidents of sexual assault and harassment by writing new, and I'll underscore new and painstakingly written regulations around Title IX. For example, the new regs limited the definition of sexual harassment to behavior that is severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. The regs went to the extent of allowing students who are accused of sexual harassment to cross-examine victims. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. Which is, when you say that again,
it's bonkers.
The accused to, in real time, cross-examine the accuser. So
the article goes on to say DeVos went through a full rulemaking process. They spent a couple of years. They dotted all the I's, crossed the T's. So bureaucratically, apparently, they defined this guidance and went through the process they had to do to write this in stone. Explain the why to me as a woman, someone who has to be concerned about the health and safety of girls and women in institutions across the country. Why?
Because
they want to stick it to the libs.
Because in her mind, there's all these women out there who are just making spurious claims of sexual assault and sexual harassment because they hate men, because they're feminists, because they're libs, because they're fill in the blank label that she thinks that they're out there to do that. I would also gather that, this is a total assumption, but something I've noticed for people like her, that if it has not happened to them, it's basically like it doesn't happen or it's not a real thing. So racial discrimination is not a real thing because she's never experienced it. Sexual harassment or belittlement and or assault is not a real thing because it's never happened to her. Again, a lot of assumptions there, but I think it's all part of the general thought process is that there's people out here to get men just to get them in trouble just because they don't like them, and I think when you look back on something like the Kavanaugh hearings, and I apologize, I can't remember the lady who accused Kavanaugh, but when you saw the reaction to her, and to think that people would say that she was just doing it for publicity or for any other reason, it's like, no. I mean, she literally blew up her life for what? I mean, he still got confirmed, and she still has to live her life, and you better believe there's people out there still sending her hateful, vitriolic type messages. So I think it's just all part of a broader attitude that kind of, plays out in various ways.
I think it's also like a further politicization of anything that can be politicized. So after Trump became elected, the Me Too era began, or at least in a full-throated process, and they just want to be on the other side of it. So they want to say that they're on. They don't want to support ridiculous claims or spurious claims against men, and oftentimes it is people that are most in these powerful positions that are being accused of sexual assault. And I think they just want to be on the opposite side. And although I was being flippant when I said to own the libs, I think it's a way to stick it to liberals and people on the left, even though it affects everybody, no matter what political party you're a part of or political persuasion. And when you look at campus assault allegations, and you can connect the dots to someone who is thinking that, well, campuses are safe spaces for liberal ideology and liberal guidance and liberal thought. And this is just another way to shut them down or to hold them accountable for something that is just ridiculous.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sids. Let's move on to the big one, school choice. Mr. Graves, you already talked a little bit about the education freedom scholarships, but let's dig a little deeper, into charters and vouchers and her impact, if any, on the expansion of charters and vouchers across the country. DeVos's press secretary in November claimed Angela Morabito, quote, "School choice is on the march across the country." And Secretary DeVos will be remembered for leading the charge for every student's right to seek out their best educational fit. In 2018, she tried to set aside $400 million to expand charter schools and private school vouchers, but both parties in Congress nixed that idea, and it never materialized. And then in the first COVID relief, $13 billion was set aside to cover costs related to the pandemic. She made both Republicans and Democrats mad, appalled that she wanted to use more of that money to pay for services such as tutoring and transportation for private schools. Congress had agreed that services should be based on private school share of low-income students. Of course, Secretary DeVos argued that the percentage of money should be based on the number of students, their overall share of students. So to me, it really appears that, and I'll also add that Michael Petrilli of the Fordham Institute, a conservative leaning think tank.
I love this quote.
Yeah, has said, you want to read it? Read it.
DeVos has been something of a drag on the school choice movement. They used to have strong bipartisan support. This is the actual quote from Petrilli. Charter schools used to have strong bipartisan support, but they have been such polarizing figure that many Democrats have abandoned the cause.
You know what? I think he's right. I don't know.
I agree.
100% right. Yeah. Which is why I always find charter schools so fascinating, because they used to be a Democrat idea. And
union created.
Yeah. And then got co-opted. Really, the last administration is really, and then Democrats across the board. And I mean, Biden, amongst all of the primary candidates, is pretty moderate when it comes to reining in charter schools. Somebody like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. I mean, they were like, abolish charter schools, strip funding, this and that. I mean, much more, I'll say radical ideas, but only in the sense that they're new. So I think Biden, as far as it goes, is pretty middle of the road charter wise, but still is vastly different than 12 years ago when Obama was elected.
I'd love to see, if you could take 4 years of Obama's administration and compare it to the 4 of Trump, I'd love to see the numbers on charter expansion between the two administrations. My guess, I could be wrong, my guess was charter expansion was greater in the Obama era than in the Trump era. What do you all think?
That would be my guess too. Yeah,
I agree.
And I mean, any half-wit would know, that's an Al Dodd word, any half-wit would know that, her approach to gaining support for charters, bipartisan support for charters, public support for charters, the way to do that is not to demonize the current system, not to demonize public ed. We've always said that there's enough food at the table for different models.
Yeah.
And her way of doing it was a cause killer because she completely, unabashedly, openly despised public schools.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately the cause that she's trying to push, and the right is trying to push, is not charter schools for the sake of opening up schools that provide innovation or opening up schools that provide further opportunity for students. We want to create charter schools really to kill public schools. And they might not say that necessarily, but the goal is to really tamp down on the power and the pervasiveness of public education across the country. That is their goal. And at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that that's their goal, but that's not really going to work because the data doesn't really support their desire to say that charter and vouchers are effective in any case.
All right, that's a good segue. So while she may not have done that much as far as policymaking that undermined public schools, Mr. Siddons, she became a rallying cry for unions across the country. Even though she wasn't really killing public schools, she became the public face she became public enemy number one for public educators, especially when the Red for Ed movement really got going. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that?
Well, I think we hit a point in our history where we have this kind of confluence of events. We have an executive, a president who is, has no desire to make any positive or progressive changes in public education or education in general. Doesn't care about education. We have an education secretary that doesn't support public education, which is bonkers. And we have a kettle pot. I don't even know what's the old phrase. There's some phrase back there that I can't think of. Where
I don't even know what's a kettle pot.
A pot that's ready to boil. No, a pot that's ready to boil. A kettle that's ready to boil. That's ready to boil over something. Anyway, we have a group of people in the nation, teachers and their community members and their supporters, who are fed up with the demonizing of public educators across the country and the lack of respect and the low pay across the nation for teachers. And you put all this together into any kind of pot that you want to talk about. And we have strikes across the country in places that we would never expect the type of public education and union support, like West Virginia and Arizona, and places that we wouldn't expect strikes to be so supportive, especially in these right-to-work states.
Well, she clearly, to your point, two things. She'll probably, as this story says, go down in history as the most well-known Secretary of Education in the history of the country. And yeah. B, I mean, she really is the first Secretary of Education to openly undermine public education.
Yep.
And basically tell the public that she has no use for it and that it doesn't serve the nation's best interests. All right, last but not least, COVID. So let's talk about what she's done during the pandemic. She started out, I don't know if I'd say strong, but in the early days of the pandemic, she did waive federal testing requirements, which was allowed public educators to take a breath there back in the spring when things were really uncertain. But she has, the article goes on to say she has since sidestepped calls from states and school leaders to provide science-driven guidance, like from the CDC, to help determine safety thresholds for closing and reopening schools. She also supported President Trump back in the late spring and summer, that calling for schools to reopen regardless of what CDC safety recommendations said. And the article points out that for all her talk about governments and bureaucracies not improving schools, she took a very strong federal stance that on a local issue that schools should reopen. Has she done anything worthwhile to support schools during the pandemic?
I mean, I would argue that the schools that are open and the school districts that have opened, I mean, I think she's part of that political machinery that encouraged them to open. I mean, you have this stark contrast of Her saying ignore the science and ignore the CDC, but then saying, oh, well, we have it dictated not by the science, but by politicians who say don't open. So she's just trying to have it every which way when really the message, because people were saying, is to Casey's point, the contrarian point, because people and scientists and quote unquote the elites, like people that went to college and have an expertise after studying in a field for 50 years, when they said to close, that obviously the knee-jerk reaction is no, we have to open everything. So I do think her and Trump, that lays squarely at their feet, the push to reopen, and then any ensuing outbreaks that happened, as well as the lack of data collection. It doesn't even talk about that, but the lack of data collection from the Department of Ed to even track how much schools have acted as incubators, because we don't even know. We still don't know. We rely on foreign data to tell us that.
I was going to say, do you think that she consciously thought about the political calculus of her locality versus Fed argument with public education, that she really couldn't roll out a federal plan for health metrics or reopening plans or anything like that, because then it would have been her flying in the face of her own position on federal involvement in public schools?
I think it would have put her job in peril.
Exactly. She can't make a policy because her boss changes his mind every 7 seconds. Mm-hmm. And a policy requires time and consistency of actually wanting something instead of just not wanting what you want. So, I don't think there was any chance of her putting a policy together, given the circumstances of how erratic Trump is.
I will say that the waiving of federal testing requirements and suspending payments on student loans, I was surprised to see that, because she's been so anti-student and anti-things that are good for public education. So when I saw that the federal testing requirements were waived, I was pleasantly surprised, because I think it shows us that, we need to really, I think it allowed us to pause and say, do we really need as the amount of onerous federal testing that is provided throughout every school year?
And interestingly, Chairman Bobby Scott is going to have some commentary on that.
I'm interested to hear what he says about it.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll ask him about federal testing. All right. Well, I think, fellas, that closes the book on Betsy DeVos.
Can I list two things? Just two, and we don't. This does not require commentary, but two additional things, just so we know. So she expanded 529 savings plans, which, for those that don't know, are college savings plans. But she expanded them so that they cover private school tuition.
Oh, great.
So not colleges. So again, funneling, diverting tax breaks or using tax breaks to divert money into private schools. And then as well as
hold on. I went to a private college.
Again, how can we help? How
private elementary school.
Because
you can use 529s for any level of education.
For K-12.
Correct. Yes.
I got it. I thought you were bashing my.
No. I went to a private school too.
I'll do that.
And then the Teach Grant, which encourages teachers with debts to go to high need schools, because of some they get, I don't know what the terminology is, but grants basically. So they denied case after case after case because of small paperwork errors that really had no bearing on the overall work that the people had done in terms of their commitment to high need schools. But this does also say, but then she worked with teachers to improve the program and apologize for its failings. So there you go.
Well, and at least we have someone in the administration who apologizes.
Yeah, so it helped more than 6,500 teachers shed their debts that they had erroneously accrued.
Well, think about how many more people could have been, their debt could have been erased if we had some competent pro-public education secretary.
The small paperwork mistakes, were those intentionally that was an intentional process to catch people on small paperwork mistakes? Was that during her administration? During the administration?
It doesn't say. It says even when she apologized for its failings, it says even though they were not the fault of the Trump administration. So if I had to guess, I think it would be less of a bureaucratic message, like find errors to not give them money, and more just bureaucratic over due diligence. Maybe
they're not going to go out of their way to forgive your debt.
Yeah.
All right. When we come back, we are going to maybe talk to Congressman Robert Bobby Scott a little bit about Betsy DeVos. But regardless, we are incredibly excited to have him on the show. Don't go anywhere. This is Ed's Not Dead. We will be right back. Fellas, we are incredibly excited to welcome Congressman Robert C. Bobby Scott to Ed's Not Dead. Congressman Scott has represented Virginia's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 1993. Prior to his service in Congress, he served 15 years in the Virginia General Assembly. Congressman Scott currently serves as the chairman of the Committee on Education and Labor. In this position, he's advancing an agenda that improves equity in education, frees students from the burdens of crippling debt, protects and expands access to affordable health care, ensures workers have a safe workplace where they can earn a living wage free from discrimination, and guarantees seniors have a secure and dignified retirement. Welcome to Ed's Not Dead, Chairman Scott. We are indeed excited and honored to have you on the show. So let's jump right into our interview. I know that you've had a lot going on in the last 24 hours, and we're going to get to talk about that, but where are we as a public education system today nationally amidst the current public health emergency or crisis that we're in?
Well, the problem we have now is that we've heard a lot about how the pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing health conditions. Those with the pre-existing health conditions have been more adversely affected by the pandemic than others. We're also finding out that those who have been at the bottom of the achievement gap have been more adversely affected than others. With distance learning, if you're at the bottom of the achievement gap, you're probably less likely to even have a computer, less likely to have connectivity or have poor connectivity at home. So all of the problems in education have been exacerbated by the pandemic and just made matters worse. And so we have a lot of catching up to do. This group would be familiar with the summer slide where low-income students leave in June, come back two months worse. By September, they're 2 months worse off than they left. Well, we've been sliding for about eight to 10 months.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of catching up to do. And so the pandemic has just made those matters worse. Other students, some students have done okay with distance learning. They've been able to keep up, but those at the bottom of the achievement gap have it's just been horrible. And special education students, it's been a disaster. We have a lot of catching up to do there.
So let me ask the question on everyone's mind is, what needs to happen in order for schools to open nationwide? What sort of steps would you like to see happen to ensure that we can guarantee the safety to get kids back in school, which is so important, as you mentioned?
Well, first of all, I think everybody who's looked at it recognizes that students do much better when they're in school, in-person instruction.
Sure.
Much better than the distance learning. They do better academically. It's better for them from a nutrition point of view because they get the school meal. They learn the social skills by interacting with people that you can't learn sitting at home. Child abuse can be detected if the students are actually there in person. And let's get serious. You're not going to reopen the economy without reopening the schools.
Yeah.
Right.
So a compelling reason to reopen the schools if it can be done safely. And you cannot reopen the schools safely without spending some money. First, you want to spread the students out a little bit, so you need a smaller class size. That costs money.
Yep.
Getting the students to school, you can't have as many students loaded up on the bus as you have. That means more trips, which means more money. You got disinfectant and PPE you got to pay for. That costs more money. And ventilation, which is a huge problem with the schools, with the ages of the schools, and the fact that a lot of schools have heating, ventilation, air conditioning problems pre-existing.
Yep.
We need to make sure they have proper ventilation. If you're in a school, without proper ventilation, if one student is infected, by the end of the day, they've all got it. If you got proper ventilation, you have a chance of surviving. And so proper ventilation and fixing the HVAC systems in all of these schools is expensive because a lot of them have problems. So we need the resources, and that's why it's so important that in the COVID relief bills, we have money for education. One of the disappointments in the last relief bill that we've just completed work on is the fact that they don't have any money for state and local government.
Right.
With the reduction in revenue, the only way they can, state and local government can balance their budgets, which they have to, is either fire people or cancel contracts and let the contractor fire people. I mean, and when you get to education, which is a huge portion of local and state government, they have to lay off education officials, about 700 and some thousand education officials across this state, across the country, have been laid off already.
Yeah.
Those are people who will not be there for instructional purposes. So the fact that we didn't do state and local is a real disappointment. It means that the money we have in there for education will, instead of helping the situation, will just go to offset some of the cuts.
And so, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that $82 billion in funding for education that's about to go through, what are some more highlights of that money that will be used?
Well, a substantial portion of that would be K through 12, about $58 billion, and it's distributed to a large extent based on the Title I formula, so land where it's actually needed.
Sure.
An incredibly significant portion will go to private schools, and not to public schools where it's most needed.
Right.
But if you want the bill passed, some things you just have to put up with. But it's there, and the school systems will use the money to make up for the deficits. There's a lot of catching up that needs to be done. I'd like for additional funding to take place to make sure that school systems can cancel the summer vacation.
Yeah.
We can't afford to take 2 more months off, inflict another summer slide where the students start regressing all over again. We need to use that time to catch up, and it's you can't cancel a summer vacation for free. That's going to cost money, and I'd like to see the federal government step up and make sure that's happening. There's a lot of catching up to do for those at the bottom of achievement gaps and for special education students. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and that's not free. Federal government has to step up because the state and local governments across the country are very much stressed already.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit, Chairman Scott. We have a segment that's immensely popular on Ed's Not Dead. It's called Dear Betsy. We're incredibly excited that we're no longer doing that episode, and for obvious reasons, that segment of our show. So we want to look beyond the pandemic for a minute.
Well, let me say one thing. You always like to say something nice, and with this secretary.
Okay, say something nice. That's good.
With this secretary, this has been difficult. The department was asked to get waivers on assessments.
Right.
Under every Student Succeeds Act, you have to. We gave a lot of flexibility on how you do it, but you got to assess to ascertain whether or not there are achievement gaps, and then you have to have a credible plan to do something about it. Because of the pandemic, there are a lot of requests to get waivers on the assessment.
Sure.
She denied those waivers. Now, if you did not deny the waiver, if you allowed those waivers, and let people go without the assessments, then we would not know what the problem is. And so that, it's going to be hard. You see, it's a lot easier to assess when the students are right there. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you got to do the best you can.
Sure.
Without that information of where we are, how far behind we are, we wouldn't know how to begin to start.
Yeah.
So let me just start off by saying something nice about Betsy DeVos. That was the right decision.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, the NAEP test was canceled for this year because they couldn't figure out how to do it.
I saw that. Yeah.
And so we wouldn't have that information. All we have are the assessments that are going to be done, and so we'll at least have some information to how to deal with the achievement gaps, and that was the right decision.
All right. Well, one thing's for sure, you're probably the first person on our show, including us, that's ever had a compliment. So we'll take it. But looking ahead, entering a new Democratic administration with President-elect Biden, what are your priorities for legislation for our K-12 public school systems across the country once we move beyond, obviously, this period of crisis that we're in?
Well, first of all, we have to refocus on the achievement gap. That's the number one priority. Another thing is we have to deal with the segregation of schools across the country. GAO report a couple of years ago found that the schools today are as segregated today as they were in the 1960s.
Yeah.
I mean, and getting worse. I mean, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And we found that integrated schools do much better for all of the students. The achievement gaps are much less. The academic achievement is much better. And so there is a compelling reason to try to integrate the schools. Before you get to the social reasons and just basic civil rights, it's a better way to educate the students. And there are a lot of things that we can do. Two things the House passed that the Senate hasn't taken up. One is to codify a program that Obama started right at the end of his term, a little grant program to help localities who want to voluntarily integrate their schools come up with a plan that's effective. There's a little challenge there because in Seattle and in Louisville, Kentucky, they had voluntary plans, and the Supreme Court found they were unconstitutional.
Wow.
Now you can do it, but you got to do it right, and so you need a little technical assistance, and that costs a little money. So you could apply for this little grant program to get some technical assistance, so you can fashion an effective plan that can withstand a constitutional challenge. I said it was at the end of his administration. Several localities applied for the money, but before any money went out, the new administration came in and canceled the program.
Jeez.
Well, we want to codify that program, and we passed legislation to do it, but the Senate hadn't taken it up. The other is the Equity and Inclusion Enforcement Act, which would give essentially what's called a private right of action under Title VI. Right now, because of Supreme Court decisions, if you're going to complain about discrimination based on patterns and practices or disparate impact in education, the Department of Education has to come forward and make the complaint. If they don't do anything, nothing gets done. Well, what's wrong with, if you feel you've been discriminated against, what's wrong with you being able to bring the case yourself? The Equity and Inclusion Enforcement Act would allow the local civil rights groups, the local parent groups to come forward and challenge practices that have a discriminatory impact. It also sets up an assistant secretary within the Department of Education and monitors like we have under Title IX, so that there'll be somebody in the local education, in the local education, its local school system, whose job it is to make sure that nobody's discriminating.
Yeah.
That bill has passed the House and has been taken up by the Senate. We need to pass that. But there is one thing that we have been successful in doing, and that is to remove about a 40-year-old vestige of the pre-1954 days, and that is a provision in law that prevents the use of federal funds in transportation for the purpose of school integration. That has been the law. You cannot use federal funds in transportation for the purpose of integrating your schools.
Wow.
That's been the law. And finally, by virtue of the COVID relief bill, we're able to get rid of that provision. And so you can use federal funds if you need to if you need to spend a little money on transportation to integrate the schools, and some of it is federal money. You can do it.
Congratulations, Chairman Scott. That is a big deal.
Yeah,
that is a big deal.
We have one more question here for you. So on our most recent episode, we were talking about some potential replacements for Secretary DeVos and some names that we had been hearing bandied about. And one of the names that came up was Dr. Leslie Fenwick of Howard University. So I did want to ask about HBCUs and specifically how they've been impacted during this pandemic. And then the second part is, what kind of support do you plan on advocating for your committee with the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, they have a list of very highly qualified individuals. Dr. Fenwick is obviously one, and she's a very exciting possibility. And
yes.
We're looking forward to hopefully. But she's just one. I'm not going to get into naming.
Hey, listen,
you can let one slip. Yeah,
but she is highly qualified.
I emailed her, but she hasn't gotten back to me. I don't know why.
Well, she's very highly qualified. But support of HBCUs is very important, and she's at Howard, and as an added issue, she's married to the former president of Howard, which makes her part of the HBCU community, which is, I think, a big plus. HBCUs have done a phenomenal job. If you look at where African-American teachers come from, disproportionate number come from HBCUs, as well as scientists and other professionals. A disproportionate number come from HBCUs, and so support of HBCUs has been extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
The COVID relief bill has a provision of debt relief. The pandemic has put a financial strain on historically Black colleges and universities, and one of the provisions in there is a relief from repayment of some of the loans that have been made that will relieve them of significant pressure. And we're very delighted to see that provision as part of the package.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great.
All right. At this point, Chairman Scott, if you have a minute, we always end our interviews with a quiz that Mr. Siddons, he is the quiz show maestro.
We need to know.
And since you have shown your support of standardized assessments on the show today, you have to endure one. So, Mr. Siddons, I'll turn it over to you.
Congressman Scott, it's been a pleasure having you with us on the pod and joining us as busy as you are. So I heard through the grapevine that your mother was a teacher, so I'm sure you're well-versed in quizzes. We know you're an expert on public education policy and Congress, and we know you're from Newport News, Virginia, but we would like to know...
My mother was a teacher. My sister is a retired teacher, so
there we go.
A lot of teachers in the family.
Well, we want to quiz you about what you know about another famous Newport, which is Newport, Rhode Island, which is neither a road nor an island. So if you answer 3 of these quirky questions about this seaside colonial New England city, you win. You ready?
No. That doesn't matter.
You could do it. Number 1, the first traffic law was created in 1678 in Newport when authorities banned what? Is it A, galloping horses on local streets, B, not curbing your horse, or C, not replacing your horse reflectors?
Reflectors.
It's actually A, the galloping horses on local streets. Apparently people were speeding through.
Oh.
It was
Thank-
crazy.
You're a great Scott. Great sport chairman, Scott. Go ahead.
Number 2, many passengers of this iconic ship were Newport residents and frequent visitors. A, from the USS Maine, B, the Titanic, or C, the Lusitania.
Lusitania.
It's actually B, the Titanic. There's actually 4 people from Newport who survived and 6 who perished, all from Newport, Rhode Island. You have one more chance. Number 3.
Okay.
How many U.S. presidents have publicly visited Newport, Rhode Island? Is it A, 4, B, 10, or C, 28?
Newport, Rhode Island, publicly?
Uh-huh.
10.
It's actually 28, including
28.
Thomas Jefferson, Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy, among others, who have publicly visited.
I knew I was in bad shape. If the answer wasn't Jazz Festival, I didn't know what.
That's right.
Well,
You do about like I do on the quizzes.
That's the only answer I had.
Well, thank you
Congressman
for
Scott.
indulging me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of
The
fun.
answer was Jazz Fest.
We've had some illustrious educational thinkers on the show, and your score was about online with how most folks do. So thank you for doing it. On behalf of Ed's Not Dead and our listeners, first and foremost, thank you for all that you do for our students and our educators across the country. If you'd like to follow Congressman Scott on Twitter, his personal Twitter is @BobbyScott. And if you want to find out about the goings-ons of the Ed Labor Committee, you can find the Ed Labor Committee at @EdLaborCMTE, @EdLaborCMTE. Welcome back to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm still joined by my co-hosts, Casey Siddons and Peter Crable. As always,
Hey.
Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform. And you can follow us on Twitter at Ed's Not Dead PC. Boys, that was an incredible interview. Good job, Mr. Siddons.
Yes.
I had a little bit of shaky legs when we were interviewing Congressman Scott, but
A little starstruck.
it was pretty awesome to interview someone with such a breadth and depth of knowledge of federal education policy and what goes into a bill. I mean, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the work that he's done on that committee and the work that he's done really as a congressperson over the years really speaks to the power of that position and how important his voice is in shaping education policy.
Raise your hand if you knew that there were any vestiges of prohibitive busing legislation left as law. I had no idea.
I was just blown away by that.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be surprised. I feel like I shouldn't be surprised, but still am.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, thank you to Congressman Scott for coming on Ed's Not Dead. Love to get him back. I also like how he waffled on the education secretary. He played that well.
Poke him a little bit.
Yes.
And he threw Betsy DeVos a bone. We had just been talking about federal testing requirements, and he touched on that. Man, he knew a lot. All right. It is that time of the show where we take a quiz and I continue my Patriots-like domination of the show over the last 4 years.
So after one episode hiatus, I'm back with a quiz.
Oh, you're speaking Klingon.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. How about now?
You're great now.
Sounds great.
I apologize. I'm in the woods of West Virginia, so the service isn't great, but
It's no excuse.
I apologize. Anyway, so I'm back with the quiz, and do you want me to so I have 5 questions, and you could either call in and if you know it, or you can raise your hand. What would you prefer?
Well, I think we should do hand raising.
Okay. Crable, what would you like to do?
For what? Just how we want to.
For who answers the question? Yeah.
Sure. Hand raising. Great.
All right. All right, so I have a quiz about the new COVID relief packages that I read over the weekend. It was 5,300 pages, just signed by Trump the other day. We all know the big facts, which include $600 direct payment checks for every adult and child earning up to $75,000 and extended support for unemployment benefits. It also contains $7 billion to increase access to broadband internet, which is interesting. But there's a 5 different things that I wanted to share with you all to see if you did your homework and see if you know these little quirky inclusions in the bill. You guys ready?
For sure. I read the whole thing.
I know you did. All right, number 1. It includes tax deductions for what type of corporate lunch? You ready? No, you raise your hand. Crable.
Like a business development lunch.
That's not the answer I was looking for.
How about this?
That's good.
Read the question again, Mr. Sid.
Tax deduction. It includes tax deductions for what type of corporate lunch?
A charitable lunch.
Incorrect. It's actually the 3 martini lunch. I'm glad that you both don't know what that is. Until now, businesses have only been able to deduct 50% of meal expenses on their federal tax returns. Now, I guess you can deduct 100% or a lot more.
As you well should.
As you well should.
Yeah.
Number 2, funding for 3 new museums celebrating which groups of people? Give me one.
Indigenous.
Incorrect, but you didn't raise your hand. Crable?
Sorry.
God,
what did
African Americans.
They just built that one 2 years ago, Crable.
The Irish.
Nope. Jeez, you guys are striking out. Give you one more chance, Crable.
Is it a racial group or a religious group?
Hey, come on, Mr. Crable.
I'm not giving you hints.
No help.
No help.
I will say Asian Americans.
Nope. Actually, it provides funding for the beginning of 3 new museums: the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum,
Ooh.
the National Museum of the American Latino, and the Coast Guard Museum.
Okay.
There we go.
That's a little embarrassing that we didn't Latino or women, Mr. Crable.
Yeah, that was. We'll just delete that part. I'll edit that out. Don't worry.
Edit that out. Okay, these questions are hard.
Well, listen, it's hard to create multiple choices for you dopes. All right, so talking about dopes, number 3 prohibits doping in what sport?
Cycling.
Incorrect.
Okay, read it again.
It prohibits doping in what sport?
Gymnastics.
Incorrect. It's horse racing in a subsection labeled the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act of 2020. The bill creates a committee to regulate the use of performance-enhancing drugs in horse racing. Who knew? Number 4.
Not going to be my first guess.
I did know that horses are terribly abused.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah.
So number 4. This legislation made what shared family digital action a felony?
Shared family digital action a felony. I don't know. Pirating cable.
Mr. Crable, do you have a guess?
Sharing nude photos.
Incorrect. I'm going to give it to Dr. D. Illegal streaming is now a felony.
Oh, yes.
It makes several changes to copyright law, including one measure aimed at protecting the intellectual property rights of artists and entertainment companies. Illegal streaming for commercial profit is now a felony.
I knew that because in my early 20s, I had one of those pirated cable boxes.
Oh,
yeah.
That was.
Those were the bomb back in the day.
They were
amazing.
They were the bomb until one day they just stopped working, and you were like,
you spent all this money and now they don't work. Number 5.
Right, Mr. Crable can tie me. Last question.
All right, this is a tough one. Number 5 warns China. The legislation warns China against interfering in the naming of whom?
Okay, read it a second time.
The legislation warns China against the interfering in the naming of whom?
The naming of the U.S. president.
Incorrect, Mr. Crable.
The naming of human rights violators.
Oh, that's very close, I think, because there's a lot to say about human rights with this person. The next Dalai Lama.
Oh, very nice.
That was a tough quiz. I apologize for making it so tough.
Well, who knew that they put? I missed those, and when the footnotes,
it's all on the footnotes, the APA style footnotes.
I skimmed it. I didn't read close enough.
I'm striking out with my quizzes.
Casey. Before we go, I have a quiz for you.
Oh my goodness!
Do you know what the topic is? The Civil War.
Oh no!
All right, they're gonna start.
Oh no!
We're gonna start easy and get progressively harder. Okay.
All right. Is it multiple choice or is it fill in the blank?
Some are the harder ones are, but the ones you should get are not. So.
All right, bring it on.
All right. Do I get a pass on this quiz?
Yes.
Only if he gets it incorrect. So he gets to go first, and then you get to embarrass him.
Oh my God!
So what was the capital of the Confederacy?
Like the state or the city?
The city.
Norfolk. Wait! It's in Virginia.
Why? He's making that up that he doesn't know that.
I don't know the capital of the Confederacy.
Oh, okay. Well, this is going to get ugly. Okay.
Wait. Richmond.
Okay. All right. Jeez, that was the easiest one. All right. Who was the president of the Confederacy?
Jefferson Davis.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, good. He's 2 for 2. Well, he's 1 for 2.
1.5. Yeah.
Give me a break. I gave you a pretty hefty. Anyway, go ahead.
How many slave states remained part of the Union? 0, 1, 5, or 6?
5.
Look at you. 3 for 3. Can either of you name any of them?
Maryland.
Yes.
Missouri.
Yes.
Tennessee.
No.
No, not West Virginia.
Kentucky.
Yes, Kentucky.
So I have 3 right now.
No, Robbie, you had one.
Illinois?
Nope.
West Virginia?
Yeah.
I thought West Virginia was carved out of.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, West Virginia was not a slave.
Well, I think
state.
maybe technically.
Yeah.
So whatever. Anyway, the last one's Delaware.
Oh, Delaware! I didn't know.
Yes.
That.
All right. The fort that was fired upon that started the Civil War.
What fort?
Yes.
Fort Sumter.
Very good.
Oh,
God, this is my quiz. This is my quiz.
Yeah, I just had to get one.
Jesus.
Right.
I've seen it off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. It's right there. It's kind of weird.
I actually was there. I've been there.
Okay.
Been there too.
All right. 2 hard questions to end off.
Jesus.
What percentage of the U.S. population died in the Civil War? 14, 2, 36, or 5?
Uh, 5%.
Dr. Dodd, you have a guess?
I was going to say 5, but I'll go with what were the other? The 2 and 14.
14, 2, and 36.
I'll go with 14. That is the weakest buzzer ever.
I think I have to make it louder. All right, the answer is actually 2%.
Oh, okay.
Darn! I should have gone with 2.
Should have done it.
Price is right. I was closer.
All right, last question. How long did Abraham Lincoln take to deliver his famous Gettysburg Address? 2 hours, 2 minutes, 42 minutes, or 12 minutes?
12 minutes.
What was the other? Was 32 minutes a choice?
42, 2, or 2 hours?
I'll go with 42.
Okay, come on. The answer is 2 minutes. If you made your way down to the Lincoln Memorial, of which the words are inscribed upon the left-hand side, also known as the south-facing wall, you would see that it is a mere 1 paragraph long. For such a famous speech, it is shockingly short.
Yeah.
All right, well, not bad. 4 to 6. That was pretty good. I mean, those
4
were
out of 6.
Yeah, those were pretty niche questions there.
No, that was 3 out of 6. He got a 50%.
I
got 4 out of 6.
The Richmond one he got.
Thank you.
I think he got.
He did say Norfolk at first, though, which was
Norfolk.
pretty embarrassing.
I was really concerned when he started.
I know. I was like, oh, jeez.
You got me very nervous.
2 hours from Richmond, guy. Come on.
I didn't live in a formerly slave state. I didn't grow up in a formerly slave state. I apologize.
You've driven to the beach before. So you've driven through Richmond plenty of times.
Mr. Siddons, who founded Pennsylvania?
William Penn.
Very good.
What other quizzes? Go ahead. Shoot some other quiz. Go ahead.
Some of my ancestors came over with him.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know any dads from Pennsylvania.
Settled in Coatesville, PA.
Yeah. Very strong English accents.
Yeah. All right, fellas, what are your plans for New Year's Eve? Because this show will be out before New Year's Eve. I assume that you are playing it safe and banging pots and pans out on the porch with your kids and just having.
I plan on going to Times Square.
Are you? There is no. Is the ball dropping this year? Is there nothing?
I don't know, but
I bet it does, and it's just on TV, but there's nobody there. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm not going.
All right.
I'm not going anywhere. Even if it wasn't a pandemic, I stay home for New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And I watch
I would put New Year's Eve as if we had to do we'll do this on a show sometime. If we have to do the 5 most overrated holidays.
It's way up there.
Oh, it's way up there.
I think it's the unequivocal number 1 in my book.
I fully agree.
Yeah, I never was a fan.
What else is on your list? You don't have to do a 5.
Halloween.
Oh, that's my number 2. Thank you.
Yes,
my number 2
1 or 2
right there.
Yeah. No, I'm a Halloween fan.
Todd's a Halloween fan.
Yeah, I'm a Halloween fan. No, I would say 4th of July.
Oh, what?
I'm not a fan of fireworks.
Yeah, I'm not. I like fireworks, but I'm not a fan of just. It's just the having to go somewhere to see fireworks. I like fireworks, but it's just a pain.
Yeah. See, we have not done that in years. The closest we did, there's an amateur fireworks display down the street from us that we did last year, where you can literally walk, and it's not like the whole production. You got to get there early and wait and park, and there's a billion people. That sucks. I fully agree with that.
Number 3 for me. Number 3 for me is Flag Day.
Okay, I wasn't. That's not even in the running. I was going to say as 3 educators. Labor Day is a big poop to me.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I don't like it. I mean, it comes right when school's starting. I mean, what
you get a day off
on Labor Day.
Yeah. I don't know.
I am a fan of Memorial Day weekend.
Of course, yeah. The unofficial start of summer. Come on.
And then I think number 2 for me, well, I don't know. Valentine's Day is a lot of pressure.
It's a Hallmark.
Just don't say it too loud. You'll be fine. Come on.
All right. Courageous. Well, we hope that our listeners had a wonderful and safe New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Lots of football to watch, and hopefully you're at home safe with your families. And as always, at the end of the year, we're incredibly grateful for you listening to Ed's Not Dead and sharing the pod with others. It's because of your listening that we do it. So thanks for tuning in, and continue to spread the word, if you will. You can find the pod on Twitter at Ed's Not Dead PC, and check out the website, edsnotdead.com. And as always, It's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership instruction and 21st century school reform. So lastly, boys, we started the pod in the summer of 2015 or 16?
It was 2016.
2016. Okay. So we are about to kiss 2020 goodbye, which none of us are going to shed a tear about.
Goodbye. Good riddance.
2021 is going to be an awesome year, is it not?
It's going to be our year.
Yeah, the Roaring 20s.
There
They're
you go.
coming.
I'm excited for 2029.
Why is
Anybody
that?
Roaring 20s? End of Roaring 20s? Anybody? Is it too soon?
Yeah, well, it's the end of the Roaring 20s was the Great Depression, so we don't want that.
I know it's supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek joke.
And
Robbie.
I'll be freaking 60. So
Oh God.
Oh,
Really?
60 years old.
There.
Well, I'll be using my cane out in the trout fields.
all right, folks. Thanks for tuning in to Ed's Not Dead. For Casey and Peter, we'll see you in 2021. Take good care. Thanks.